The Radio Memories Network is brought to you in part by Liberated Syndication, podcast publishing made easy, libsyn.com. That's libsyn.com.
Welcome to the Old Time Radio Network Adventures. What adventures awaits our heroes? Let's go back to the early days of radio and our imaginations to our featured presentation.
Good evening and welcome to Sunday Showcase. I'm Damiano Pietropaolo. Tonight, we conclude our dramatization of Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, a co-production with BBC's Radio 4. Huck and Jim are joined on their raft by two unwanted but colorful con men, the Duke and the King. Willing to do anything for money, the guests make Jim, a runaway slave, very uneasy, and he begins to make plans to escape to the territories. Here now is the third and final episode of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, starring Martin Roach and Christopher Jacot, with James Key as the Duke and Dennis O'Connor as the King.
Huckleberry Finn, son of the town drunkard, has run away from his persecuting father and from a persecuting good widow who wishes to make a nice, truth-telling, respectable boy of him. Huck and a runaway slave named Jim have found a fragment of a lumber raft and are floating down the Mississippi by night and hiding in the willows by day, bound for Cairo, whence Jim will seek freedom in the heart of the Free States. But in a fog, they pass Cairo without knowing it and find themselves in slave-owning territory. One morning, Huck rescues two men who are being chased out of a village and brings them to safety in a cottonwood grove.
Breakfast will be ready in no time, gentlemen.
Why is that raft of yours all covered up?
Oh, we don't want anyone stealing it.
Well, why aren't you on the river?
Oh, you know, we like to kind of rest during the daytime.
Uh-huh. That Jim friend of yours, is he a runaway nigger?
Goodness sakes. Would a runaway nigger run south?
Well, I suppose not.
A slave heading south, that's a good one.
You see, my folks was living in Pike County in Missouri. They all died off but me and Pa and my brother Ike. Pa, he allowed that he'd break up and go down and live with Uncle Ben, who's got a little one-horse place on the river 44 miles below Orleans. Pa had some debts, so when he squared up, there weren't nothing left but $16 and our nigger Jim. Well, Pa had a streak of luck one day. He catched this piece of raft, but a steamboat run over the forward corner of the raft one night, and we all went overboard and dove under the wheel.
You don't say.
I do say. Jim and me come up all right, but Pa was drunk, and Ike was only 4 years old, so they never come up no more. Well, for the next day or two, we had considerable trouble, because people was always coming out in skiffs and trying to take Jim away from me, saying they believed he was a runaway nigger. We don't run daytimes no more now. Nights they don't bother us.
Well, I'm sure I can cipher right away so as we can run in the daytime. You leave it with me.
Yeah, we don't want to be passing by that town yonder in daylight now, do we? It mightn't be healthy.
During breakfast, we all laid off and talked, and the first thing that came out was that these chaps didn't know each other.
Now, what got you into trouble?
Well, I've been selling an article to take the tartar off the tooth, and it does take it off too, and generally the enamel along with it. But I stayed about one night longer than I ought to, and was just in the act of sliding out when I ran across you on the trail. That's the whole yarn. What's yourn?
Well, I'd been running a little temperance revival there, and taking as much as $5 or $6 a night. Business is growing all the time, when somehow or another a little report got around that I had a way of putting in my time with a private jug on the slide.
Well, who can blame you? Temperance is thirsty work.
Yeah, Niggy rousted me out this morning and told me the people was gathering on the quiet with their dogs and horses, and if they got me, they'd tar and feather me and ride me on a rail, sure. I didn't wait for no breakfast. I wasn't hungry.
Oh, man, I reckon we might double team it together. What do you think?
Well, I ain't undisposed. What's your line, mainly?
Oh, journeyman printer by trade, do a little in patent medicines, theater actor, tragedy, you know. Take a turn at mesmerism and phrenology when there's a chance. Sling a lecture sometimes. Oh, I do lots of things. Most anything that comes handy, so it ain't work. What's your lay?
Well, I've done considerable in the doctoring way in my time. Laying on of hands is my best specialty. For cancer and paralysis and such things. And I can tell a fortune pretty good when I get somebody along to find out the facts for me. Preaching's my line, too, and working camp meetings and missionarying around.
Oh, alas.
What are you laughing about?
Oh, you would not believe me. The world never believes. Let it pass. 'Tis no matter. The secret of my birth.
The secret of your birth? You mean to say?
Gentlemen, I will reveal it to you, for I feel I may have confidence in you. By rights, I am a duke.
Did he say he was a duke, Huck?
That's what he said, Jim.
No, you can't mean it.
Yes, I am the lineal Duke of Bridgewater. And here am I, utterly forlorn.
Now then, there's no need to be sad about it.
Not whilst the sun is shining.
No, it's no use, gentlemen. I am inconsolable. Mind you, if you could find your way to acknowledging my dukehood, that might do me some good.
Anything to oblige.
How do we do it?
Well, you ought to bow and say, Your Grace, or My Lord, or Your Lordship. And at dinner, one of you should wait on me, and see that my every whim is satisfied.
All through dinner, Jim stood around and waited on him and says, Will your grace have some of this or some of that? And a body could see it was mighty pleasing to him. But the old man didn't look comfortable over all that petting that was going on around that duke.
Look-a here, Bilgewater. I'm nation sorry for you, but you ain't the only person that's had troubles.
No?
No, you ain't. You ain't the only person that's been snaked down wrongfully out in a high place.
Alas!
Bilgewater, can I trust you?
To the bitter death. The secret of your being. Speak.
Bilgewater, I am the late Dolphin.
Huck, did he just say...
You are what?
Yes, my friend. Your eyes is looking at this very moment on the poor disappeared Dolphin, Louis the 17th, son of Louis the 16th and Marie Antoinette.
You? At your age? No. You mean you're the late Charlemagne. You must be 600 or 700 years old at the least.
Trouble has done it, Bilgewater. Trouble has brung these gray hairs and this premature balditude. Yes, gentlemen, you see before you in blue jeans and misery the wandering, exiled, trampled on and suffering rightful king of France.
Didn't take me long to make up my mind that these liars weren't no kings nor dukes, but just low-down humbugs and frauds. But I never let on. If I never learned nothing else out of Pap, I learned that the best way to get along with his kind of people is to let them have their own way. There was a little one-horse town about 3 miles down the bend. The Duke said what he was after was a printing office. We found it, a dirty, littered-up place over a carpenter's shop. The carpenters and printers had all gone to a camp meeting, and no doors locked. The Duke said he was all right now, so me and the king lit out for the camp meeting.
Hear me, brothers! Hear me, sisters! I am the miserablest sinner that ever sailed the seven seas. I am a pirate. I've been a pirate these 30 years out in the Indian Ocean. I was robbed last night, robbed and put ashore off a steamboat without a cent. And I am glad of it. It was the blessedest thing that ever happened to me because I am a changed man now.
7.75 cents, plus a 3-gallon jug of whiskey I found in the woods. I tell you, Bilgewater, nothing better than pirates to work a camp meeting with.
Well, I ain't done so badly. Take a look at this poster I printed up special.
Ah.
It had a picture of a runaway nigger with a bundle on a stick over his shoulder and $200 reward under it. The reading was all about Jim and just described him to a dog. And whoever would catch him and send him back, he could have the reward and expenses.
Now, after tonight, we can run the raft in the daytime if we want to. Whenever we see anybody coming, we can tie Jim hand and foot with a rope and lay him in the wigwam and show this handbill and say, we captured him up the river.
Bilgewater, I congratulate you.
Pretty smart, ain't he, Jim?
Oh, it's smart, all right.
It was after sunup now, but we went right on and didn't tie up. After breakfast, the Duke went down into his carpet bag and fetched up a lot of little printed bills.
The world-renowned Shakespearean tragedian Garrick the Younger of Drury Lane, London.
That's me.
You don't say.
Have you ever trod the boards, Royalty?
No, but I'm in up to the hub for anything that'll pay Bilgewater. But you see, I don't know nothing about play acting. I was too small when Pap used to have 'em at the palace. You reckon you can learn me?
Well, next they got out a couple of long swords that the Duke made out of oak laths and begun to practice the sword fight. The Duke called himself Richard III, and the way he pranced around the raft was grand to see.
A hit! A palpable hit! Tell you what, Royalty, the Richard III is good. Yoke it with Romeo and we'll have a first-class show. But we need a little something to answer the encores with.
What's encores, Bilgewater?
Well, it's when the audience don't let you leave the stage without you give them something else. I'll do the Highland Fling, and you, well, let me see. You can do Hamlet's soliloquy.
Hamlet's which?
Hamlet's soliloquy. Oh, it's sublime. Sublime! Always fetches the house. I reckon I can piece it from memory. To be or not to be, that is the bare bodkin that makes calamity of so long life. For who would fardels bear till Burnham Wood do come to Dunsinane, but that the fear of something after death murders the innocent sleep, great nature's second course, and makes us rather sling the arrows of outrageous fortune than to fly to others we know not of. There's the respect must give us pause. Wake, Duncan, with thy knocking! I would thou couldst.
But soft, you, the fair Ophelia, open not thy ponderous and marble jaws, but get thee to a nunnery. Go!
That night we had our show, but there weren't only about 12 people there, just enough to pay expenses. And they laughed all the time. Everyone left anyway before the show was over, but one boy which was asleep. After we tipped him out, the Duke was blazing mad.
Well, what do you expect? These Arkansas lunkheads can't come up to Shakespeare.
Low comedy, Bilgewater. That's more their style.
Oh, I can size their style all right. Look at this new handbill.
At the courthouse for 3 nights only, David Garrick the Younger and Edmund Kean the Elder in the thrilling tragedy of the Royal Nonsense. Admission 50 cents.
How's that going to bring 'em in? You've doubled the price and we don't even have a show.
We don't need a show. Look at the last line of the bill.
Ladies and children not admitted.
There. If that line don't fetch 'em, then I don't know Arkansas.
The following night, the house was jammed full of men in no time.
Gentlemen, it is my pleasure to present Mr. Edmund Keene, the elder of the London and Continental Theatres, the finest thespian of his age, in the Royal Nonsuch, the finest tragedy that...
Get on with the show!
So, without further ado...
The next minute, the king comes a-prancing out on all fours, naked, and he was painted all over. Rings streaked and striped, all sorts of colors as splendid as a rainbow. And it was just wild. It was awful funny. And when the king got done capering and capered off, they roared and clapped and stormed till he come back and done it over again.
That's it, gentlemen. Our tragedy will be performed only 2 nights more on account of pressing London engagements.
What do you say? Is it over? Is that all?
That is all.
Sold! We are sold! Hold on, gentlemen. We are sold. No doubt of that. But we don't want to be the laughing stock of this whole town. What we want is to go out of here quiet and talk this show up and sell the rest of the town. Then we'll all be in the same boat.
Next day, you couldn't hear nothing around that town but how splendid our show was. House was jammed again that night. Third night, the house was crammed again, but they weren't newcomers this time. They were people that was at the show the other 2 nights. The Duke was at the door taking the money. Excuse me, Your Grace.
Another full house, eh, my boy?
Look at their pockets, Your Grace, bulging with rotten eggs and cabbages. If I know the signs of a dead cat being around, and I bet I do, there were 64 went in tonight.
I'll meet you back at the raft. Walk fast now and then shin for the river like the Dickens was after you.
What about the king?
Oh, it's every man for himself tonight.
We struck the raft at the same time, and in less than 2 seconds we was gliding down the stream, nobody saying a word. I reckon the poor king was in for a gaudy time of it with the audience. Pretty soon he crawls out from under the wigwam.
Well, how'd the old thing pan out this time, Duke?
Your Highness! Well, now, how long you been in there?
All evening long, Your Grace. Well, I knew they'd lay for us the third night.
Oh, they must be having themselves a picnic over there now. They brought plenty of provisions.
Them rapscallions took in $465 in that 3 nights. By and by, they was in the wigwam asleep and snoring. Jim and me could breathe easy for a few hours.
Don't it surprise you the way them kings carries on, Huck?
No, it don't, Jim. Because it's in the breed. All kings is mostly rapscallions as far as I can make out.
But this one do so smell like the nation, Huck.
Well, they all do, Jim. We can't help the way a king smells. History don't tell no way.
Well, anyways, I don't hanker for no more of them, Huck. These is all I can stand.
I went to sleep, and Jim didn't call me when it was my turn. He often done that. When I waked up just at daybreak, he was sitting there with his head between his knees, moaning and mourning to himself. I knowed what it was about. He was thinking about his wife and children away up yonder. I do believe he cared just as much for his people as white folks does for theirin. Don't seem natural, but I reckon it's so.
Poor little Elizabeth. Poor little Johnny. It's mighty hard. I expect I'm never going to see you no more. No more.
Try not to carry on so, Jim. We'll head back north just as soon as we can.
I know that, Huck. A while ago, I was reminded of the time I treated my little Elizabeth so ornery. She wasn't only about 4-year-old, and she took the scarlet fever and had a powerful rough spell. But she got well. One day she was standing around, and I says to her, "Shut the door." She never done it, just stood there, kind of smiling up at me. Makes me mad. Don't you hear me? Shut the door. She just stood the same way, smiling up. And I fetched her a slap the side of the head that sent her a-sprawling. Then I went into the other room. And when I come back, the door was a-standing open yet, and the child is standing most right in it. And the tears running down. Oh, I was mad. I was a-gun for the child, but just then, along came the wind and slammed it to behind the child. Kablam! My lad, the child never moved. She never budged. Oh, Huck, I bust out a crying and grabbed her up in my arms. Oh, she was plumb deaf and dumb, Huck. Plumb deaf and dumb. And I'd been treating her so.
Next morning, the Duke, he reckoned he'd lay off and work his brains an hour or two in the village over the water. And the king, he allowed he would drop over to t'other village. I went with him in the canoe. We had bought store clothes. The king told me to put on mine, and when he put on his, he looked that grand and good and pious that you'd say he had walked right out of the ark, and maybe was old Leviticus himself.
Seeing how I'm dressed, I reckon we better arrive down from St. Louis or Cincinnati or some other big place. Go for the steamboat, Huckleberry. We'll come down to the village on her.
Pretty soon we come to a nice innocent-looking young country Jake sitting on a log, swabbing the sweat off his face. He had a couple of big carpet bags with him.
Where are you bound for, young man?
For the steamboat. I'm going to New Orleans. You wouldn't be Mr. Wilkes, would you? If you are, you've come mighty near getting here in time.
No, my name is Blodgett, Alexander Blodgett. Reverend Blodgett, just one of the Lord's poor servants. But still, I'm sorry for Mr. Wilkes for not arriving in time, if he's missed anything by it, which I hope he hasn't.
Well, he won't miss any property by it, because he'll get that all right. Mm-hmm. But he's missed seeing his brother Peter die. Oh. Poor Peter. Never talked about nothing all these 3 weeks. Hadn't seen his brother Harvey since they was boys together. And hadn't ever seen his brother William at all. That's the deaf and dumb one. William ain't more than 35.
Oh, did anybody send him word?
Oh, yes. About a month or two ago. You see, Peter was pretty old, and his nieces from his brother George and his wife both died last year. His nieces was too young to be much company for him, except Mary Jane, the red-headed one. He most desperately wanted to see Harvey. And William, too.
Oh, now, why do you reckon Harvey don't come?
Oh, he lives in England.
Oh.
Sheffield. Preaches there. Hasn't ever been in this country.
You're going to Orleans, you say?
That ain't only a part of it. I'm going in a ship next Wednesday for Rio de Janeiro, where my uncle lives.
Well, that's a pretty long journey, but it'll be lovely. I wished I was a-going. Is Mary Jane the oldest? How old is the other?
Mary Jane's 19, Susan's 15, and Joanna's about 14. That's the one that gives herself to good works and has a hare lip.
Oh, poor things, to be left alone in the cold world so.
Well, they could be worse off. Old Peter had friends. There's Hobson, the Baptist preacher, and Deacon Lot Hovey, and Ben Rucker, and Abner Shackelford, and Levi Bell, the lawyer, and Dr. Robinson, and their wives, and the widow Bartley.
Well, the old man went on asking questions till he just fairly emptied that young fella.
Was Peter Wilkes well off?
Oh, yes, pretty well off. He had houses and land, and it's reckoned he left $3,000 or $4,000 in cash hid up summers.
The king made me paddle the young fellow up to the steamboat landing. The boat was about done loading, and soon she got off, with the young informer on her.
Now hustle back right off, Huckleberry. Fetch the Duke up here in the new carpet bags, and tell him to get himself up fancy regardless.
I see what he was up to, but I never said nothing, of course. When I got back with the Duke, we hid the canoe, and the king told him everything the young fellow had said.
Bilgewater, how are you on the deaf and dumb?
Oh, leave that to me, Your Highness. I have had occasion to play deaf and dumb on the boards of the Theatre Royal.
About the middle of the afternoon, we managed to hail a steamboat to take us 5 miles down to the village. About 24 men flocked down when they saw us.
Excuse me, my good men. Can any of you tell me where Mr. Peter Wilkes lives?
I'm sorry, sir, but the best we can do is tell you where he did live yesterday evening.
Alas, alas, our poor brother, gone, and we never got to see him. Oh, it's too hard.
Then the king turns around, blubbering and making a lot of idiotic signs to the Duke on his hands, and blamed if the Duke didn't drop his carpet bag and bust out a-crying. Well, the news was all over town in 2 minutes. When we got to the Wilkes house, the 3 nieces was standing in the door. Mary Jane was red-headed, but that don't make no difference. She was most awful beautiful, and her face and her eyes was all lit up like glory. She was so glad her uncles was come.
Oh, Uncle Harvey.
You poor lambs. Here are your devoted uncles, alas and alack, come too late.
Then the king looked around and saw the coffin over in the corner on 2 chairs. So then him and the Duke walked slow and solemn over there. They bent over and took one sight, and then they bust out a-crying so you could have heard them to New Orleans most.
Now, I know that my dear nieces, Mary Jane, Susan, Joanna, would be glad if the main principal friends of the family would take supper with us this evening. Now, if my poor brother laying yonder could speak, I know that he would name Reverend Mr. Hobson, Deacon Lothovey, Mr. Ben Rucker, Abner Shackelford, Levi Bell, Dr. Robinson, and their wives, and last but never least, the widow Bartley.
Why, that's most kind, sir. I'm Abner Shackelford at your service. Dr. Robinson and Laura Bell are away on business, but all the other friends you mentioned will be pleased to come.
Uncle Harvey, here's the letter that dear Uncle Peter left for you.
Oh, now, let's see. $3,000 gold to the girls. The Tanyard, along with other houses and land, worth about $7,000 to Harvey and William, along with another $3,000 in gold to Harvey and William.
He'd drawn a map where he hid the gold under the floorboards in the cellar.
Well, wasn't that characteristically considerate of him? You gals relax yourselves up here. My brother and I, and our devoted valet, Adolphus here, we'll see about that gold.
I was their devoted valet. When they found the bag of gold, they spilt it out on the floor, and it was a lovely sight. All them yaller boys.
Why, Bilgewater, it beats the royal nunchuck, don't it?
Indeed it do, Brother Harvey.
Being brothers to a rich dead man is the line for you and me, Bilge.
Oh, say, I got another idea. Let's go upstairs and count this money and then take it and give it all to the girls.
Good land, Duke, that is the most dazzling idea that ever a man struck. Let him be suspicious of us after that. Oh, this'll lay him out.
Here, Mary Jane, Susan, Joanna, take the money, take it all. It's the gift of him that lies yonder, cold but joyful.
Dear good souls.
They was all so busy hugging and kissing each other that they didn't notice an iron-jawed man had come in the door.
There, not another word. Now, tomorrow, William and I invite everyone in town to come to the funeral. Well, Peter respected everybody, so it's fitting that his funeral orgies should be public.
You expect us to believe that, do you?
Why, Robinson, ain't you heard the news? This is Harvey Wilkes, Peter's brother from England.
Ah, my poor brother's dear good friend and physician.
Keep your hands off of me. You, an Englishman? It's the worst imitation I ever heard. You, Peter Wilkes' brother? You're a fraud, that's what you are.
Now, Doctor, he must be Harvey. He knows all about Peter and the girls and all Harvey's friends by name. Why, he even knows the names of our dogs.
Mary Jane, I was your father's friend, and I warn you, as an honest friend, to turn your backs on that scoundrel. He's the thinnest kind of imposter. Turn the rascal out. I beg you to do it.
Well, here is my answer. Take this $6,000, Uncle Harvey. Invest it for me and my sisters any way you want to. And don't give us no receipt for it.
That night they had a big supper, and all the friends of the family was there except old Dr. Robinson. I stood behind the king and the duke's chairs and waited on them as their valet, Adolphus. When it was all done, me and Joanna, the youngest niece, had supper in the kitchen off of the leavings.
Did you ever see the King, Adolphus?
Who? William the Fourth. Well, I bet I have. He goes to our church.
What? A regular?
Yes, regular.
I thought the king lived in London.
Well, he does. Where would he live?
But I thought you lived in Sheffield.
I see I was up a stump. I had to let on to get choked with a chicken bone.
The king goes to our church when he's in Sheffield in the summertime, when he comes there to take his sea baths.
Why, how you talk? Sheffield ain't on the sea.
Oh, well, who said it was?
Why, you did.
I didn't know that.
Honest Injun, now, ain't you been telling me a lot of lies?
Honest Injun?
Lay your hand on this book and say it.
I see it weren't nothing but a dictionary, so I laid my hand on it and swore.
Well then, I'll believe some of it, Adolphus, but all the same, I have my suspicions. What? Do you have suspicions of, Joanna? You know, that's always your way, Mary Jane. Always sailing in to help somebody before they're even hurt. Well, Adolphus had told some stretchers, and I said I wouldn't swallow it all. Well, it don't make no difference what he's saying. The thing is for you to treat him kind and not be saying things to make him remember he's a long way from his own country.
Says I to myself, this is the girl that I'm letting that old reptile rob her of her money? That's when my mind was made up. I resolved to rescue that $6,000 for them or bust. It was easy to find. I saw the king and the duke stuffing it into a straw mattress in the duke's room. When everyone went to bed, I slipped down the stairs with the gold. I meant to hide it outside of the house somewheres, but as I was passing by the parlor, I heard somebody on the stairs behind me. I darted into the parlor, and the only place I see to hide the bag was in the coffin, so that's what I done. They had the funeral in the morning, and in the afternoon the king and the duke had the auction in the public square. They were selling off everything. Furniture, land, slaves, and promising to take the three girls back to England. Well, whilst they was at it, a steamboat landed, and in about 2 minutes, Dr. Robertson come up, and with him, a very nice-looking old gentleman, and a nice-looking younger one with his right arm in a sling.
And here we've got this lot here. This lot. Well, now. Here is another set of heirs to old Peter Wilkes. You pays your money and you takes your choice.
I am Peter Wilkes' brother Harvey, and this is his brother William. We have had misfortunes. My brother has broke his arm, and our baggage got put off at a town above here last night by mistake. In a day or two, when I get the baggage, I can prove it.
Broke his arm? Did he? Very, very convenient. Lost their baggage? That's mighty good under the circumstances.
I think we can settle this without baggage. Is there anybody here who helped to lay out Peter Wilkes for burying?
Well, me and Ab Turner done it.
Then perhaps this gentleman here who claims to be Harvey Wilkes can tell us what was tattooed on Peter's breast.
The king, he whitened a little. He couldn't help it. And it was mighty still, with everybody bending a little forwards and gazing at him.
Yes, sir. I can tell you what's tattooed on his breast. It's just a small, thin blue arrow.
heard what he said. Was there any such mark on Peter Wilkes's breast?
We didn't see no such mark.
Good. Now, what you did see on his breast was a small dim P and a B, which is an initial which he dropped when he was young, and a W. Come, ain't that what you saw?
No, we didn't. We never seen any marks at all.
Then someone says they should dig up poor old Peter and have a look. They dragged us to the graveyard, the real Wilkes brothers and the real frauds, and me too. And they was threatening to lynch all 5 of us. Dr. Robinson had me by the wrist, and a body might as well try to give Goliath a slip. The whole crowd of them sailed into digging by the flickering of the lightning. At last they got out the coffin and begun to unscrew the lid. All of a sudden the lightning let go a perfect sluice of white glare.
By the living jingo! Here's the bag of gold on the dead man's breast!
Dr. Robinson let out a whoop like everyone else and dropped my wrist to bust his way in and get a look. And the way I lit out and shinned for the road in the dark, there ain't nobody can tell. When I struck the raft at last, I could see Jim by the fire in the wigwam.
Out with you, Jim, and set the raft loose.
Huck? Bless you, Huck, is that you? Where's royalty?
Glory be to goodness, we're shut of them.
Is that so?
Not now. Have it for breakfast, Jim. Cut loose and let her slide.
So in 2 seconds, away we went, a-slide in the river. But a second later, I noticed a sound that I knowed mighty well. Sure enough, here they come. The king and the duke, just laying to their oars and making their skiff hum. It's all I could do to keep from crying. We dasn't stop again at any town for days and days. We was down south in the warm weather now, and a mighty long way from home. The king and the duke began to lay their heads together in the wigwam and talk low and confidential. Jim and me didn't like the look of it.
I reckon they starting to break into somebody's house or store, Huck.
First chance we get, Jim, you and me are going to clear out and give those 2 rascals the cold shake.
Early one morning, we hid the raft about 2 miles below a little shabby village named Pikesville.
I'm going into town to smell out if anybody's got wind of the royal nonsuch. You stay here, Billswater. If I'm not back by midday, you and the boy can meet me in the village.
The Duke, he fretted and sweated around and was in a mighty sour way. He scolded me and Jim for everything. Something was a-brewing, sure. When midday come and no king, he and the Duke went up to the village and found the king in the back room of a low little doggery. He was so tight he couldn't walk. The Duke, he begun to abuse him for an old fool, and the king sassed him back, and the minute they was fairly at it, I lit out and spun down the river road like a deer, for I see our chance.
Set her loose, Jim. We're all right now.
Jim was gone. I sat down and cried. I couldn't help it. But I couldn't sit still long. Pretty soon I went out on the road and I run across a boy walking.
You seen a strange nigger around here?
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
Down at Silas Phillips' plantation. He's a runway nigger, and they got him. Was you looking for him?
You bet I ain't. I run across him in the woods about an hour ago, and he said if I hollered, he'd cut my livers out.
Well, you needn't be afeard no more. They got him down at the old Phelps place. There's a $200 reward on him.
Who nailed him?
Was an old fella, a stranger. And he sold out his tent and him for $40, 'cause he's got to go upriver and can't wait. You bet I'd wait if it is 7 years.
I went to the raft and sat down in the wigwam to think. After all this long journey, after all we'd done for them scoundrels, they could have the heart to serve Jim such a trick as that, and make him a slave again all his life for $40 dirty. I said to myself it would be 1,000 times better for Jim to be a slave at home where his family was, as long as he'd got to be a slave. So I sat down and wrote, Miss Watson,
Your runaway nigger Jim is down here 2 miles below Pikesville, and Mr. Phelps has got him, and he will give him up for the reward if you send. Huck Finn. I laid the paper down and sat there thinking how good it was all this happened so. And I went on thinking, over our trip down the river, and I see Jim before me all the time, in the day and in the nighttime. Sometimes moonlight, sometimes storms.
Well, you wouldn't have been here if it hadn't have been for Jim. You'd have been down there in the woods without any dinner and getting most drowned too.
Not me, Jim.
That you would, honey. Chickens knows when it's gonna rain, and so do the birds, child.
I'd see him standing my watch on top of his so I could go on sleeping, and see how glad he was when I come back out of the fog.
Goodness gracious, is that you, Huck? And you ain't dead? You ain't drowned? You's back again. It's too good for true, honey. It's too good for true.
Then I happened to look around and see that letter. It was a close place. I took it up. I was a-trembling because I got to decide forever betwixt two things, and I knowed it. Then I decided. All right, then. I'll go to hell. And tore it up. I would take up wickedness again, which was in my line, being brung up to it. For a starter, I would go work and steal Jim out of slavery again. Because as long as I was in and in for good, I might as well go the whole hog. Phelps's was one of those little one-horse plantations. I weren't fixing up any particular plan, just getting near the house. When one hound, then another got up and went for me. In a quarter of a minute, I was a kind of a hub of a wheel, spokes made out of dogs.
Be gone! You tag! You spot! Be done, sir! It's you, at last, ain't it?
Yes'm.
You don't look as much like your mother as I reckoned you would. But, Lord sakes, I'm so glad to see you. Children, it's your cousin Tom. What's kept you? Boat get aground?
Yes'm, she...
Don't say yes'm. Say Aunt Sally. Where'd she get aground?
It weren't the grounding. We blowed out a cylinder head.
Good gracious. Anybody hurt?
No, Mum. Killed a nigger.
Well, it's lucky because sometimes people do get hurt. Your uncle's been up to town every day to fetch you. You must have met him on the road.
No, I didn't see nobody, Aunt Sally.
Here comes your Uncle Silas now. You wait behind that tree. Don't let on you're here. Well, Silas, has he come?
No, and I must say, it makes me dreadful uneasy.
He must have come, and you missed him along the road.
Why, Sally, I couldn't miss him.
Why, Silas, look yonder. Who's that behind the tree?
Why, who is he?
Who do you reckon 'tis?
I ain't no idea.
It's Tom Sawyer.
By jinks, I almost slumped to the ground. I was so glad to find out who I was. Being Tom Sawyer was easy and comfortable, and it stayed easy and comfortable till by and by I hear a steamboat coughing along down the river. Suppose it's Tom on that boat, and suppose he steps in here and sings out my name before I can throw him a wink to keep quiet. So I told the folks I would go uptown and fetch down my baggage. I said I could drive the horse myself. I'd rather they wouldn't take no trouble about it. So I started for town in the wagon, and when I was halfway, I see a wagon coming, and sure enough, it was Tom Sawyer. And I stopped and waited till he come along.
Hold on! I ain't never done you no harm, Huck Finn. You know that. So what do you want to come back and haunt me for?
I ain't come back, Tom. I ain't been gone.
Looky here. Were you ever murdered at all?
I weren't ever murdered. I played it on them. Come over here and feel of me if you don't believe it. So he done it, and it satisfied him. He wanted to know all about it because it was a grand adventure and mysterious, so it hit him where he lived. But I said leave it alone till by and by and explained about me being mistook for Tom Sawyer. Well, Tom, he loved that. It was just his kind of thing.
Aunt Sally and Uncle Silas have never seen me, so I'll say I'm Tom's brother Sid. They ain't never seen Sid neither.
They weren't expecting Sid.
No matter. I'll say how restless I was at home after Tom left, so Aunt Polly, she let me take the next boat. We're gonna have fine times, Huck.
There's one more thing, Tom. A thing that nobody don't know but me. There's a nigger here I'm trying to steal out of slavery.
His name's Jim. Old Miss Watson's Jim.
What? Why, Jim is...
I know what you'll say. It's a dirty, low-down business, but what if it is? I'm low down, and I'm gonna steal him, and I want you to keep mum and not let on.
I'll help you steal him.
Shucks, Tom, you're joking.
I ain't joking either. You and me will engineer the greatest escape of a runaway slave there ever was.
Tom and me carried it off first rate, pretending to be brothers. We was on the lookout all the afternoon, but nobody happened to say nothing about any runaway slave. We was afraid to try to work up to it. But at supper that night, one of the little boys asked Uncle Silas if we could all go to the Royal Nunsuch show up in town.
No, I reckon there ain't gonna be any. The runaway nigger told Burton and me all about that scandalous show, and Burton said he would tell the authorities. So, I reckon they've drove the audacious loafers out of town by now.
Right after supper, Tom and me clumb out of the window and down the lightning rod and shoved for the town. But we arrived too late to give the king and the duke a hint of what was brewing. Here comes a raging rush of people with torches, and as they went by, I see they had the king and the duke astraddle of a rail. That is, I knowed it was them, though they was all over tar and feathers and didn't look nothing in the world that was human.
There ain't nothing we can do for 'em now, Huck.
They was regular rascals, Tom. It makes me sick to see them treated so.
Me too. Come on. I think I know where we can find Jim.
Well, Huck. And good land. Ain't that Mr. Tom?
Quiet, Jim. Don't ever let on to know us. And if you hear any noises going on nights, it's us, me and Tom. We're going to set you free. I don't like it, Huck. What do you mean, Tom? This window hole's big enough for Jim to get through if we wrench off the board.
Blame it, the whole thing is just as easy as can be. There ain't no watchman to be drugged. Oh, now, there ought to be watchmen. There ain't any battlements or a moat in front of the cabin, and there's Jim chained by one leg to the leg of his bed. Well, all you gotta do is lift up the bedstead and slip off the chain.
That was Tom Sawyer all over. He was a stickler for style. The next few weeks, me and him wore ourselves out executing the escape according to the best authorities. But we went too far with anonymous warnings.
Don't betray me. There is a desperate gang of cutthroats from over in Indian territory going to steal your runaway nigger tonight. I am one of the gang, but have got religion and wish to lead an honest life. Signed, Unknown Friend.
You sure this is a good idea, Tom? The family's nervous enough with the skull and crossbones you stuck up yesterday.
We have to give them fair warning, Huck. It's the honorable way.
Well, the following night, I opened the door to the sitting room, and there was 15 farmers, and every one of them had a gun. I was upstairs in a second and down the lightning rod in another one. Tom, we gotta jump for it. The house is full of men yonder with guns.
No. Is that so? Ain't it, bully?
Hurry. Where's Jim?
I was right behind you, Huck.
We slipped down stealthy toward the fence in engine file, and got to it all right, and me and Jim over it. But Tom's britches catched fast on the splinter on the top rail, and when he pulled loose, he made a noise.
Who's that? Answer, or I'll shoot!
We didn't answer. We just unfurled our heels and shoved.
Here they are! They broke for the river! After 'em, boys!
So here they come, full tilt. But when they let loose the dogs, they was our dogs. And when they see it weren't nobody but us, they just said howdy and tore straight ahead. We struck through the bush to where my canoe was tied and hopped in and pulled for dear life. Then we struck out easy and comfortable for the island where my raft was. Now, old Jim, here's the raft. You're a free man again. And I bet you won't ever be a slave no more.
And a mighty good job it was, too, Huck.
We was all as glad as could be. But Tom was the gladdest of all because he had a bullet in the calf of his leg. It was hurting him considerable and bleeding.
Don't stop now. And the evasion booming along so handsome. Man the sweeps and set the raft loose.
No, sir. I don't budge a step out of this place without a doctor to see to Tom.
So I set out in the canoe, and Jim was to hide in the woods when he see the doctor coming. Doctor was a nice, kind-looking old man when I got him up. I told him me and my brother was over on Spanish Island hunting, and he must have kicked his gun in his dreams, for it went off and shot him in the leg. He reckoned my canoe was big enough for only one, so he told me to go on home and get them ready for my brother. The next morning, the doctor and some men brought in Tom, who was kind of delirious on a mattress.
and Jim with his hands tied behind him. Next morning, I heard Tom was sleeping better, so I slips to the sick room to see if we could put up a yarn for the family that would wash. But Aunt Sally had got there before me. We sat there till Tom opened his eyes very natural.
Hello? Well, I'm at home. How's that? Where's the raft?
It's all right.
And Jim?
The same.
Oh, good. Splendid. Did you tell Auntie?
About what, Sid?
Why, about the way the whole thing was done.
What whole thing?
How we set the runaway nigger free, me and Tom.
Good land. What is the child talking about? Oh, dear, he's out of his head again.
No, I ain't out of my head. We did set him free, and we done it elegant, too. We had to steal candles and the sheet, and the shirt, and spoons, and tin plates, and flour, and just no end of things. And we got our canoe, and we made for the raft, and all was safe. And Jim was a free man, and we done it all by ourselves.
Mercy sakes. Well, you get all the enjoyment you can out of it now, for if I catch you meddling with him again...
Meddling with who?
Why, the runaway nigger, of course.
Tom, didn't you tell me he was all right? Hasn't he gotten away?
Indeed he hasn't. They've got him back in the cabin, safe and sound on bread and water, and loaded down with chains till he's claimed his soul.
Oh, they ain't no right to shut him up. Turn him loose. What? He ain't no slave. He's just as free as any creature that walked on this earth.
What does the child mean?
I mean every word I say, Aunt Sally. I've known him all my life, and so is Tom there. Old Miss Watson died 2 months ago, and she was ashamed she was ever going to sell Jim down the river, and said so. And she set him free in her will.
Then what on earth did you want to set him free for, seeing as he was already free?
Well, that is a question, I must say, and just like women. Why, I wanted the adventure of it.
We had Jim out of the chains in no time, and when Aunt Sally and Uncle Silas found out how good he helped the doctor nurse Tom, they made a heap of fuss over him.
There now, Huck. What'd I tell you up there on Jackson Island? I told you I've been rich once, and I was going to be rich again. And it's come true.
Know what we should do? One of these nights we should slide out of here and go for howling adventures amongst the Injuns over in the territory. Suits me, but I ain't got no money now, Tom. It's likely Pap's got it all away from Judge Thatcher by now and drunk it up. No, he ain't. It's all there yet, $6,000 or more.
Your pap ain't a-coming back no more, Huck.
What do you mean, Jim?
Remember the house that was floating down the river? And there was a man in there, covered up, and I went in and uncovered him and didn't let you come in? Well, that man was your pap.
Tom's most well now, and got his bullet around his neck on a chain. And so there ain't nothing more to tell. And I'm rotten glad of it. Because if I'd have knowed what a trouble it was to tell a story long as this, I wouldn't have tackled it. But I reckon I got a lot out for the territory ahead of the rest. Because Aunt Sally, she's going to adopt me and civilize me, and I can't stand it. I've been there before.
You've been listening to Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, adapted for radio by Marcy Cann. In the cast, Huckleberry Finn was played by Christopher Jacot, Jim was Martin Roach, the King was played by Dennis O'Connor, and the Duke was James Key. Mark Twain and Harvey Wilkes were played by Mark Cavan. Colonel Sherburne was Michael Copeman, Country Jake and Town Judge were Jim Jones. Abner and Boggs were played by Michael Caruana, Aunt Sally was Elva Mae Hoover, and Tom Sawyer was Peter Oldring. Also in the cast, Herbie Barnes, Tara Samuel, Pierre Bro, Aniko Bonsawin, Glenn Bang, and Sandy Webster. The music was composed by John Roby, who also played the banjo. The script editor was Dave Carley. The casting director was Julia Tate. Recording engineer was Greg DeClute. Sound effects were by Wayne Richards. Associate producers were Michelle Parise for the CBC and Eugene Murphy for the BBC. Toronto producers were Greg DeClute and Linda Grierson. Adventures of Huckleberry Finn was directed in Toronto by BBC director Ned Chaillet. Executive producer in Canada was Damiano Pietropaolo. For Sunday Showcase, I'm Damiano Pietropaolo. Stay with us now for Katie Mallock and Jazz Beat on CBC Radio 1. Good night.